Hello and welcome to the Arise interview, where we take time to reflect on the big stories from the news and on the fortunes and affairs of the world in an hour of conversation with commentators, analysts and thought leaders. I'm Charles Anyegolu. Coming up in the next 60 minutes, in the wake of the EndSars protests calling for an end to police brutality and substantial reforms in Nigerian governance, the movement has received a considerable boost from two key governors in the north and west, who say that a fundamental restructuring of the Nigerian state is the only way forward if there is any sincere intention to make the country work better for all its citizens. So is Nigeria now irreversibly on the path to some form of constitutional re-engineering? We'll speak to a prominent lawyer and former Nigerian Minister of State. Later, the big impending political event of the week, the election for the US presidency. President Trump has been racing across several states in an attempt to gain ground on his Democratic rival Joe Biden as the American presidential campaign enters its final stage. Both candidates have been appealing to voters in key battleground states. More than 95 million people have voted early, setting the country on course for the biggest voter turnout in over a century. We'll speak to a Republican and a Democrat, as well as our special correspondent. Coming up. Now, if the solemn words of two of Nigeria's hugely prominent governors are given heed to by the country's leadership, Nigeria could be on the verge of making history by introducing sweeping changes to its constitution. Both the chairman of the Nigerian Governors Forum, Ekiti State Governor Kayode Fayemi, and his Kaduna State counterpart, Governor Nasser El-Rufai, have warned that in the wake of the EndSars protests spearheaded by Nigeria's growing and restive youth population, the country was now a ticking time bomb, and that change needed to be properly invested in. That change, they said, is restructuring by way of devolution of powers, which would reform the political structural framework of this country in order to enable peaceful and inclusive development. They acknowledged that Nigeria's current federal structure had not served the best interests of Nigerians, and that it was no surprise protests across the country had snowballed into a mass movement, bringing the contradictions of the Nigerian state into sharper focus and testing the leadership severely.
Permit me to refresh our memories with the main recommendations our committee made. The APC Committee on Federalism recommended that the Federation be rebalanced, with more powers and responsibilities devolved to the states. The committee also clarified that the Federation is a relationship solely between the states and the federal government, and that each state should be allowed to operate the system of local government that best suits its circumstances, culture, and diversity. It was the committee's considered opinion that in a country as diverse as ours, one size or structure of local governance does not fit all.
It is also important to note that many of our empires and kingdoms were territorial rather than tribal. They luxuriated and thrived on their diversity and formed unions and alliances based on shared understanding and mutual respect. A cursory analysis of our languages and belief systems will reveal, like the Sadana Sir Ahmadu Bello noted, that we actually have more in common than some of our differences would suggest. Therefore, while the colonialists may have been culpable for creating the country that we call Nigeria without consulting us, the task of forging a nation out of this colonial invention rests squarely in our hands.
And that's Governor Kayode Fayemi, and before him, Governor El-Rufai. Well, one man who's been a consistent advocate for police reform and for restructuring Nigeria is the lawyer and former Minister of State for the Federal Capital Territory, Abuja, Chuka Odom. And he joins me now in the studio. Thank you very much indeed for coming in.
Thank you, Charles, for having me.
We didn't quite hear everything there, but some pretty forthright statements from Governor Fayemi and Governor El-Rufai. The question is, I mean, in support of restructuring. The question is, what impact are those statements likely to have on the moves towards the restructuring of this country? And those moves, as we know, have been very hesitant and slow-footed.
Well, I think this EndSars protest has become a watershed moment in Nigerian history. And in those few days of rage, a whole lot of reimagining of the concept of Nigeria as a unit, as a political and a political entity, has come into very sharp focus. I was pleasantly surprised to hear key stakeholders like El-Rufai and Governor Fayemi, take a bold stand on the issue of restructuring. My only concern is that we have had this kind of talks in the past. I remember in the last administration, before the Buhari administration, there have been spirited efforts made to kind of like rejig the federal structure and make it a more inclusive governance structure that would devolve powers to the states.
But those efforts came quite late, though, in that administration.
It did quite come late.
So
just
they couldn't have done it, I mean.
Just like we are almost 2 years into this administration. So I'm thinking, what can possibly be done within the framework of the remaining 2 years of this administration?
So what do you reckon?
My thinking and my take is that if these calls are sincere and not just mere talking points or being political correct in the current environment, hoping that that will assuage some feelings and soothe some frayed nerves so that time can elapse and then business continues as usual, because this is my take on some of these talks. It's all made to calm the nerves of people, and bring the tension in the country down, so that somewhere along the line it will just be a comment, a talk. But if it is not that, if it is actually a determined desire to effect some changes, I think they still have a lot of time within the framework of this administration, within the constitutional framework, to begin the process of devolving powers, more powers to the states.
Right. Well, give us your analysis then. I mean, because we talked about the fact that it's been a very, very hesitant moves. I mean, the APC, which is the ruling party, did set up a committee, a commission, to look into restructuring, which was headed by Governor El-Rufai.
First of all, the APC campaigned on restructuring. They did promise Nigerians that they would look at the issue of restructuring. There was a whole lot of things contained in the promises that was made before that government came into place. But like I said earlier, these are talks, because we Nigerians do not know or do not seem to push forth in the direction of holding political operators accountable for the promises they make during electionary campaigns. So I do think in the current context and environment, there is something that could be done. Provided, and it's a very big provided, that the National Assembly buys into this.
And the National Assembly is key, isn't it?
Very critical to this process, because we are in a constitutional democracy. There's no way you can begin to effect these changes without the buy-in, a total buy-in of the legislative and executive branch. And that,
because it's got to be done democratically.
There's no other way. We are not going to topple a government unconstitutionally. There's no way we can. There is no mechanism to effect any change of governance in Nigeria other than as laid down by the Constitution. Otherwise, it becomes illegal and unconstitutional and treasonable. So if what they are saying in effect is that they want to go the old route, which is to set up a committee to look at the possibilities, study the options that are available to devolve powers to the states and effect some changes, some key changes that will bring us to fiscal federalism, then I'm afraid this will be another
talking. But I mean, they've already done the committee thing that you're talking about. They set up a commission.
We have had a lot of
but this particular government has done that, and Governor El-Rufai referred to it because he chaired that committee.
Yes.
So there is no question of going back again to do another one. But in the direction of moving things forward and getting the buy-in of the National Assembly that you correctly pointed out, President Buhari would be key, wouldn't he? If he came out and said, yes, I support this and I want to push this whole thing forward.
Quite frankly, Charles, that's the elephant in the room. And we all know that in the executive branch of government, they hold the real power. And until the president makes a statement, a commitment that I am interested, I wholeheartedly endorse restructuring, then all these talks remain, window dressing. Because if the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria were to address the country today or tomorrow to say, gentlemen, we've seen the effect of this EndSars project. It portends grave danger for our continued existence as a country. It means that there's a huge chunk of the population of this country, the youth, that are left behind, and that we need to carry them along. And to carry them along, this structure is not designed for that voyage. It's not designed for that trip. And we've done this and over again, and we see it's not working. So we are not reinventing the wheel. We have to find alternative means to create more inclusive governance that will carry everybody along, especially the young population, which over the years have been trampled and made redundant.
But in fairness to the president, I mean, he has made some positive noises in that direction. I mean, just
call it noises.
Within the last 24 hours or so,
Yeah.
48 hours, 24 hours, he was talking to the youth and saying that they should now take the things they want done to the negotiating table. In other words, he's inviting them to sit down and talk with him.
I'm an optimist that takes my umbrella on a sunny day. I believe that most of the body language you're seeing from government officials in this period, under the context of what is going on, is intended to calm frayed nerves. My understanding of it is that it may not last the cycle of this appeasement period.
Right.
And there's no honest intention on the part of all these people making these statements to embrace this idea.
So how would you want to push it forward, to capitalize on what has happened in the last couple of weeks, the attention that's been drawn to all these issues by the youth movement? How would you, as somebody who is an advocate of restructuring, capitalize on that and run with it?
I think this is a first step. The civil society groups in the country, development partners, all stakeholders, young men, women, organizations that know and understand the issues at stake, should jump into the wagon and begin to hold our political operatives accountable for the statements they make. Because, I mean, you can't just be doing this like a breast pocket handkerchief. You put it on your jacket when you want to look nice, and then when the push comes to shove, you take it off and start talking tough again. You know, there's a bit of tension in the country, let me put it that way.
Right.
And so there's everything now to tap down that anxiety, tap down that tension. I don't know whether this whole argument will continue, but I think too that if, for instance, our stakeholders, the members of the National Assembly, were to show the same enthusiasm as demonstrated by Governor El-Rufai and Fayemi,
Right.
and come on board to say, we align ourselves with this thinking. Please, what do we need to do? Let us get involved. There's committees in the National Assembly that could do a little bit of spade work, which will now give Nigerians the view and the honest intention, reveal the honest intention to move in that direction.
I hope it will happen the way you say you would like to see it happen. Chuka Odom, former Minister of State for the Federal Capital Territory of Abuja, thank you very much indeed.